The Buffalo Bills just made the right move, I believe, the wrong way. We know that in life, truth and time go hand in hand, and over time, the truth always seems to surface. In this situation, Beane could have just made a brilliant move. But on the outside, a lot of us, Bills Mafia, are concerned. We're a little flabbergasted. A lot of us really loved Sean McDermott, including myself. Today in this video, I want to talk about 4 things. 1, why this coaching staff transition might actually be the best thing for the Buffalo Bills. 2, I want to talk about who some of the top candidates are. 3, I also just want to talk about and acknowledge, I think, the terrible fallout with Sean McDermott and how there was things even over the last couple of months that seemed to indicate that this was going to happen. But 4, our team also did make some roster moves, about 10 of them yesterday. We'll acknowledge those briefly at the end, but stick with me to the end of this video today because I don't want you to miss what I believe Beane is trying to do, even amidst really just all the lunacy associated with this transition. That being said, my name is Collin. This is Crack the Table. We're all Bills No Breaks, breaking down Buffalo Bills content every single day. Would you do me a favor? Would you subscribe to this channel? Join this community every single day. We are having conversations down in the comments. And as always, if you would help me out, smash that like button. It helps get these videos out to more and more Bills fans. But the first thing that I want to talk about is this. There is a very clear link and a very clear history in a lot of organizations of a head coach who's a winning head coach being fired and bringing in especially an offensive-minded head coach and winning in the next year or in one of the subsequent years after that very quickly. We see from Ari here, and I'm going to give you about 4 examples on this because I think it's actually very compelling, and I think there's a historical trend of this, which is frankly, I think the brilliant move that Beane is trying to do. But it's this, is the Bucs fired Tony Dungy when he couldn't get over the hump, sounds familiar, hired John Gruden and won a Super Bowl. The Broncos fired John Fox and they couldn't get over the hump, so they hired Gary Kubiak and won a Super Bowl. The Bills firing Sean McDermott is exactly that, and I believe that that is the mentality and that is the mindset of Beane. Now, I'm not saying he went about it the right way, but I am saying that I think this is where he's going. Sean McDermott did so in Buffalo. He made them a winner after decades of losing, but now they need a guy to get them over the hump. John Fox, I think, was this great example. And Sean McDermott, I think, is a very similar guy to John Fox. Sean McDermott was, I believe, the most winning coach in the last 6 years in the entire NFL overall. John Fox had over 70% win rate in the regular season from Denver in 2011 to 2014. He was fired because he had a Hall of Fame quarterback and his playoff record was 3-4 with no Super Bowls. Sounds familiar. He was a defensive-minded head coach, sounds familiar, and was fired in favor of a offensive-minded coach, Gary Kubiak. Now, a lot of Bills Mafia right now are clamoring for the son of Gary Kubiak, one of the hot young minds in the NFL right now, Clint Kubiak, who we'll talk about in a little bit. However, Kubiak did go on to win the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning the following year. A Hall of Fame level quarterback, i.e. Josh Allen is the parallel. But a couple other examples. The Bucs, very similar. They fired Tony Dungy. I'll get this right on the screen for you. They fired Tony Dungy. They hire John Gruden. The result, immediately after the 2001 firing to the 2002 season, they get the Super Bowl. Tony was fired after the 2001 season, and the Bucs won the Super Bowl the next year. And in Gruden's first season, with the defensive roster that Tony Dungy built, with the key players and the system in place, it led them to victory with John Gruden's success on offense. Dungy is actually credited with the foundation, while Gruden provided the offensive adjustments to finish the job, as people have said. Now, another example, I've already highlighted the Gary Kubiak one, but another one which is very interesting and even recently familiar, which it's not as clean as this other one, but is this Los Angeles Rams move. We know that for years Spags was there. We know that for years Jeff Fisher was there. But but 2016, Jeff Fisher was fired. Sean McVay was hired. An immediate Super Bowl appearance, or not an immediate Super Bowl appearance, but about a year or two after that, they lost with Jared Goff off, and then a couple years later, they make a big trade, which again, I'm thinking, and I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at Brandon Beane, and I'm wondering if this is going to be the upcoming year where he starts to push more of these draft picks in. They fire Jeff Fisher, they bring in Sean McVay. Sean McVay gets the roster on the offense exactly where they want it to be, and then they push the chips in, and then they go for the Super Bowl. The turnaround was pretty rapid. The first Super Bowl appearance was not, right away, but it was setting the framework for the success. However, I want to move on and just talk about a couple things here, and you can look back on the screen, and I'll highlight this. The Buffalo Bills, of course, announced that they relieved Sean McDermott of his duties. Typo in the first sentence, as a lot of Bills Mafia has acknowledged. You can read that in a moment. But a couple other things here, and I think this is just important to note. The President of Football Operations title, which is a change for Brandon Beane, is really pulling Pegula out of all things football. He's simply becoming the owner, the guy who's running the ship, just from the financial perspective. And Brandon Beane is now knighted king over the Bills organization. And we know the first order of business was to remove Sean McDermott as head coach. This is just such a weird situation. The Buffalo Bills promote their general manager, who hired Sean McDermott, who came and frankly was a result of Sean McDermott. And now Brandon Beane has the ear of Pegula, gets a promotion, is now leading everything as both president and general manager, makes this firing move, and it just feels kind of gross. But I want to talk a little bit about the coaching transitions. Again, firing a coach isn't necessarily bad. The team has been winning. The roster has been a championship caliber roster for years. But the change was made ultimately not about the floor of the organization, where they've been from a regular season perspective, but it was about playoff success. It was about the ceiling and about where the organization can go. The successor of all those teams I talked about was all offensive-minded head coach with a backing of a defensive-minded head coach, which is exactly the parallel of the Buffalo Bills. I asked the question yesterday on Twitter, what do you guys think? There's a lot of coaches right now that are out there. I'll give you a list of even more in a moment. But Brian Daboll, Mike Tomlin, Clint Kubiak, and Mike McDaniel are all options. Drop a comment right now below who you think should be the next coach of the Buffalo Bills, and if they should be an offensive or defensive-minded head coach. For me, I don't know who I want yet. Clint Kubiak seems like a great option, but when I look across the board right now, I think I want an offensive-minded head coach. I think Joe Brady is he just got another interview yesterday with the Ravens. He's had an interview now with the Dolphins and the Ravens. I think he's gone. I think he's going to go take a head coaching job somewhere. But when I look at who I want the Buffalo Bills to bring in as a head coach, I think it's an offensive-minded head coach, because I want Josh Allen in the next 5 years to have multiple back-to-back MVP seasons and also have the level of offense with the acquired offensive weapons, i.e. receivers and strengthened offensive line, to absolutely put up 32, 33, 34 points per game in the regular season and absolutely thrash teams. To never be in a situation where we need to worry about penalties, to never be in a situation where we need to worry about the refs in New York calling in and having these crazy no calls or these crazy plays. I think he set our offense up well to succeed. The guys at Cover One, Greg posted this. You could just take a brief look at this. There's a lot of guys on here. Clint Kubiak, Mike McDaniel, Cliff Kingsbury are some of the hot names. But again, there's the Jesse Minters. There's the Chris Shulas. There's a lot of guys out and about right now that we could add. Again, drop a comment down below who you think should be the next coach of the Buffalo Bills, but also who you think should they be an offensive or defensive coordinator or minded head coach. Not only that, there's a bunch of odds right now. Mike McDaniel seems to be leading in these odds. Mike Tomlin, Daboll. A lot of people are like, bring Daboll back. Let him unlock Josh with the maturity that he's had over the last couple of years. Joe Brady is another guy, an internal hire. I just don't think the organization moves in that way. I don't think you fire McDermott to upgrade Joe Brady. I don't think that makes sense. A guy that's very interesting to me would be Brian Flores. A defensive-minded head coach. He's been with the Vikings. He was ran out of town in Miami because of some off-the-field stuff. I think Brian Flores would be an incredible coach who would actually bring our defensive scheme up. He blitzes a lot. I think he does a really good job as a defensive coordinator. But there's a lot of other guys. Clint Kubiak is probably, on the offensive-minded head coach, probably one of my top guys. Though, when I look at this, and I want to talk a little bit about the fallout of Sean McDermott, just a brief moment. There's a little bit of language in here, so sorry about that. But Kevin makes some really, really good points. And I maybe drop down in the comments how you felt yesterday about this firing and what it meant for you. But this is what Kevin said. And this is a lot of bashing right now on Brandon Beane, which, I think Brandon Beane, just to frame this up, I think Brandon Beane right now, he really wants his title back of Big Baller Beane. He lost it a couple of years ago when he couldn't hit on these draft picks. And we could name the draft picks he didn't hit on. He traded away. He made some bad signings. He gave some players who aren't productive big contracts. There's a lot there. I think Brandon Beane wants his title back. And I think one of the ways, and I think one of the things that's maybe a hit to that is just all of this right here. This is what Kevin says. He says, it's not Sean McDermott's fault that they had to play Balin Spector and Dane Jackson in the biggest game of the year. Again, we talked about this previously, but we know that Dane Jackson and Darnell Savage gave up touchdowns individually in that playoff game against Denver, which was the nail in the coffin. Sean McDermott didn't hand out bad contracts and screw up the Bills' cap situation, which, by the way, Brandon Beane did. Sean McDermott didn't give Curtis Samuel, Josh Palmer, Elijah Moore almost $70 million in total value. Sean McDermott didn't go on WGR and puff his chest talking about wide receivers. Sean McDermott didn't fail to add a wide receiver at the trade deadline. I think he was clamoring for it. Actually, there was very specifically before the Jaguars game, comments in a press conference, which this is very telling to how the relationship was unfolding over time, that Sean McDermott was saying, wow, it was amazing that the Jaguars went out and traded for Jacoby Myers. That was a great addition at the trade deadline. Behind words like that is I think, a spite for Brandon Beane not making a move at the trade deadline. Yes, he went and got Brandon Cooks, which ended up being helpful for us, but Jacoby Myers and Brandon Cooks, I think, would have put us over the edge against Denver especially. Brandon Beane didn't fail to add a legitimate pass rusher to this team after pouring asset after asset into the defensive line year after year. For the last couple of years, we've been talking about this. The Philadelphia Eagles pour all this cap and all this money into their defensive line. The Bills do the same. The Bills do not get after the quarterback like the Philadelphia Eagles and like some of these other teams did. McDermott wasn't one of the main reasons for all of these missed draft picks over the years. Sean McDermott had his shortcomings, no doubt. He did. There was some places where we were like, man, what is this guy doing? Why isn't he more, on top of these situations? But again, especially at the end of this year, you could see real growth. Not only all of that, there was some issues PR-wise. And I'm just going to highlight these, and I want to give you one example. Players were caught off guard in criticizing the move of the firing of Sean McDermott. There was probably 15 players yesterday that were very upset that Brandon Beane made this move, and they had no idea it was coming. The press release, again, had a typo in the first line. They were like, let's just get this out there. Let's just get ahead of the bad narratives. Well, it just made things worse. In ownership, I don't think, and my wife was just on her phone on Instagram yesterday, scrolling reels, and there is so many videos that are being created about just the love that this fan base had for Sean McDermott. Yeah, there was about, 5 people, ever since the 13-second play, the 13-second game, people have been out on Sean McDermott. There's people for years that have been calling for Sean McDermott's job. People are saying, yes, Sean McDermott should have been fired then. And I'm not saying he wasn't ready to get fired. I love Sean McDermott. I would have loved to see another year with Sean McDermott. However, it's not that there wasn't a case to fire him. I'm not saying that Brandon Beane did the wrong thing in firing him. I just think he went about it in the wrong way. And not only that, but Pagula is almost tone deaf. We're going into a new stadium without Sean McDermott. Like, let it ride for one more year. I get all the narratives around it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments about some of this stuff. But Teron Johnson, again, one example of this. Teron Johnson, picture with Sean McDermott. He's just saying SMH, which means shake my head. He's just mad. He's upset about this. It's a little frustrating. Couple other quick things just to end this video. Again, the Bills, instead of acknowledging maybe the press release that Sean McDermott had and really just some of the gratitude he had for the organization, they didn't even put that on the Buffalo Bills Twitter or the X, by the way. Instead, they were posting stuff like this. Hey, we signed all these guys. to future contracts, which these are all guys who've been on our team already this year. But in all of it, this whole charade over the last 24 hours has been really frustrating as even a fan. I want to see more respect from Brandon Beane to Sean McDermott. I think he deserved it. He was the most I believe he was the most winning coach in his time in the last 6 years as a head coach of an NFL team in the entire NFL. We're firing him because he lost in the divisional round. I get it. We're firing him, but frankly, it should have been a catch. It should have been a first down. The Bills should have won that game. The Bills should be going against the Patriots in the AFC Championship. We should be winning that game. Now, how it would end up with the Seahawks, I don't know. But hey, in all of it, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Again, I'll just say this. If you, there's a couple of you guys who've become members, who've joined the channel. It's called the Crack the Table Crew. Some of you guys have done that. It's a way to support me, support my family. If you feel, so inclined in your heart to support me, the channel, my family, join the crew. There's a bunch of different options there. Everything is appreciated. Everything helps. But in all of it, thank you again for tuning in. But God bless. Go Bills. We'll see you later.